Lovely to see you all here this afternoon. I hope so far you've enjoyed speaking to some of the stand holders, and indeed this is an opportunity where if this afternoon we can do one or all of three things, then it would have been a successful afternoon. And those three things are, in my opinion: number one, you learn something new; two, you meet some new people; and three, maybe you meet a new customer or supplier. The FSB is an incredibly powerful and informative, and also it does what it says on the tin. It represents small businesses where it counts. And the FSB is all about bringing to the forefront, where it counts at government level, the issues that you are dealing with. I was lucky enough this week to have been invited to number 10, but the senior advisors of the PM was really keen to listen to what the issues were. Now, it's not that they didn't know what the issues were, of course they do. We've been lobbying them for years, and Mike and his team, and we have Graham Fisher here from Head of Policy for the FSB, they've been at it for years, and successfully so. And so we kind of thought maybe this is just a tick box exercise. In for 10 minutes, whip round number 10, make you feel good, out the door. We were there for nearly 2 hours. They really wanted to know exactly what's happening on the ground, not just what they're hearing from some of our senior people in the FSB. So, good to have you here this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. I'm going to start off with, unfortunately, by apologising for the fact that our first speaker, Jonathan Lord, who's the MP for Woking, so we are technically outside of his area, but we did ask the incumbent MP, Philip Hammond, whose constituent this is, if we could have Jonathan here, and he was happy to oblige, but, and here's the but, they're all at the House of Commons, there's a 3-line whip and he can't be here. Now, it's unfortunate, but if he was here and wasn't there, we'd all be slating him for not being there and being here, so it's a no-win situation, isn't it? So he has very kindly at the last minute, though, sent us a video message, so Jason, if we can run that, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Lord. I'm the Member of Parliament for Woking, and like all of my other Surrey colleagues, I'm afraid that we have to be in Parliament today. But I did just want to send you a goodwill message. I think that the annual Surrey FSB conference is an important event, and the FSB do terrific work all year round. It does look as though the economy is turning. Things are looking up in our part of the world. So I hope that you have a prosperous and successful 2014. Our thanks to the organisers for putting on this conference, and of course to Velocity for donating us their lovely building for today's event. I hope that you have a very, very successful conference.
So, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Leader of Surrey County Council, David Hodge. David, if you don't mind me saying, is a fantastic supporter of the FSB, and the policy team here in Surrey has been working closely with his team to try and help work out how on earth they can give more business to small businesses here in Surrey. David is a fantastic advocate of small businesses, and I'm delighted that he managed to be here this afternoon to speak to us all.
I make no apologies. I'm a fan of FSB, and if that gets me in trouble with politicians, I don't really give a monkey, all right? Simple as that. Because I have to say to you, I remember a story that somebody told me a long time ago when I first became involved in politics. Excuse me walking around. Somebody said to me, a good friend of mine, well, he was until he made me get married to somebody else, but a good friend of mine, he said to me, do you know the problem at Surrey County Council? They haven't got a clue about businesses. They don't understand businesses, they don't recognise businesses, and they don't help businesses. And it's really important that we as the politicians, the ones that have access to a lot of money, should talk to you and be absolutely clear that Surrey would not be the place it is without the business community. And it's very simple. I know we in Surrey employ quite a lot of people, and we have a large budget, but actually when we look around the room and when we look around Surrey as a whole and see the huge amount of people who put their life, their time, their investment in business, we in Surrey County Council must respect that, because you're the people that employ the people in Surrey, and you're the people that make Surrey such a brilliant place it is to live and bring up kids. For me, I always will take my hat off to the business community. Without you, we'd be nowhere. what can Surrey County Council do for you? And 4 things came up. A simpler, easier to use procurement system. 99% of small businesses didn't stand a chance of going through our procurement system. I've got some people here from procurement Delta. Where are we? All right. Didn't stand a chance of getting through the system. It was too complicated, too many questions. For heaven's sake, I wonder if you had babies or something, I suppose, on it. But there was too many questions. And what we really wanted to do is work with the FSB. How could we do that? I'll explain in a minute. So the first thing was a simpler procurement system. The second thing was, where are the youngsters, people like me, the youngsters, with the skills to do the jobs that you need them to do? How are they going to learn? How are they going to get into the right frame of mind that 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock you've got to get out of bed and go to work? Not as easy as you think for some youngsters these days. And what are we going to do to invest in the infrastructure? How are we going to try and sort the A3 out? How are we going to try and sort the roads out? Where are we going to get the money from to sort the roads out? And finally, most importantly, you all complained about broadband speeds. That was the 4. So first of all, what we did is we set out with FSB, the Institute Directors and the Chamber of Trades, and particularly FSB. We had a number of sessions over the last 18 months with our procurement team. So I'm really grateful to the FSB, who played a big part in that. So what's next? What are we trying to do?
Councils have never faced a more challenging time.
The financial situation is only getting tighter, while demand for our services continues to grow.
Supporting the local economy, providing help for residents who need it most, improving our roads, providing job opportunities for young people. At Surrey County Council, we know the task is going to get tougher and tougher, and we cannot continue to do things in the same way that we always have done.
But we are confident in our future because we have a clear strategy based on what the residents of Surrey tell us they value. This is our commitment to you.
So what are we going to do? In 2013 to 14, we are going to concentrate on creating 500 apprenticeships. The next phase of our school building programme providing 16,000 additional school places, helping 30,000 residents live independent lives, driving ahead with our 5-year road improvement programme, and tackling issues that blight local communities, such as litter.
We're doing all that and for less money. We're cutting our costs by £68 million this year. Over 5 years, we'll be reducing our costs by £250 million.
Our aim is to always deliver great value for Surrey residents. We'll do all these things in partnership with others, such as borough and district councils, the health service, the police, the voluntary sector, and local businesses. And we'll continue to listen to what our residents tell us is important. We will involve you in decisions about the future of public services and your communities. The changes and improvements we make over the next 5 years are all designed to improve the lives of our residents.
Looking ahead, how will we make a difference by 2018?
Surrey's economy will be strong and competitive. We will have a clean and litter-free county. You'll see our roads are well maintained. Our children will have a great start to life. We'll support residents to be more independent. We will work to improve the health and well-being of Surrey residents. Our Surrey residents and businesses will be strong and vibrant. Surrey is a great place to do business.
Surrey is a great place for children to prosper.
Surrey is a great place to live.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Laurence Janta-Lipinski. Laurence, we met a colleague of his, Joe Twynham, at a political party fringe meeting, and we asked them if they'd like to come and speak at our event. Laurence is going to do a presentation on the state of the economy, and I know it's going to be fascinating. I think they've done that presentation at number 10. Recently, I think Joe did that at number 10 a few months back, so we're eager to hear what you have to say. So may I introduce Laurence Janta-Lipinski. Laurence.
So firstly, let me just tell you a little bit about YouGov and who we are. We're a full-service research agency. We're founded in 2000. Pioneers of using the internet for accurate representative surveys. We have a panel of over 450,000 registered adults in Britain and over 2 million worldwide. This is our global reach. We cover most of the globe, and we're always looking to go further. But I'm not here to talk about us, I'm here to talk about the state of politics and the state of the economy in Britain today. So if we start back in May 2010 and the 2010 general election, I'm sure everybody in the room knows the result and led to a coalition. So what's happened since? Well, this chart I hope everybody can see, but I'll explain if not. So this chart is charting the voting intention figures for the three main parties over the last 3.5 years. And as you can see, there's a slight honeymoon period for the Conservative parties, which all governments tend to get when they come to power. And then since then, we've had pretty much Labour lead solidly. There was a brief blip around the time when Miliband was fighting with the unions and his own party at the start of 2012. But aside from that, we have Labour leads pretty much for the last 3 years. The Lib Dems have completely fallen off a cliff. They are bouncing around 10% and have been since pretty much middle of 2010, towards the end of 2010. And then the purple line is all other parties. This is pretty much wholly made up of UKIP voters. They peaked around the time of the local council elections earlier on this year and have faded slightly, but I'd imagine as we move towards 2014 European elections, we'll see that UKIP figure spike again. Okay, so do you approve or disapprove of the government? As you can see, and this is pretty common in any government in any country, you tend to find approval ratings drop. There's been a slight increase. The nadir that you see is pretty much the omni-shambles budget, and since then there has been a gradual increase in approval for the government, but it bounces around between -20 and -30, which means that 20 to 30% more people disapprove of the government than approve of them. Mirroring this is whether or not people think the coalition parties are working well together. The Conservative voters tend to feel that they're working better than Lib Dem voters, the few that are left. And this is pretty much mirrored in this chart. So what do people think are the most important issues facing the country at the current time? I'm sure everybody can guess what the top one is, and it is the economy. It was in 2010, will be in 2015, and almost certainly 2020 as well. Following this is immigration. Immigration has been the second highest issue to British adults. The only time it dropped into third place was when crime shot up when half of London was on fire during the riots. Welfare, health, and housing. So the economy is such an important issue. I've now got a few slides which highlight some of the key economic trends that we find in our data. So firstly, in your opinion, how good or bad is the state of Britain's economy at the current time? Now, the first thing to note here is this tracks from June 2010, and it's starting from an incredibly low base. As soon as the Conservative Party and Lib Dems, apologies, came to power, around about 70 to 80% more people thought the economy was bad than thought it was good. And this gradually got slightly lower over the next couple of years, but didn't really move a huge amount. And then what you can see is this huge spike up to just 40% of people think the economy is bad and think it's good. But it is a dramatic increase over the past few months as we've seen what George Osborne has said, the recovery taking hold. Economic optimism. How do you feel the finances of your household will change over the next 12 months? This again, although it's not quite as pronounced as the overall condition of the economy, people are now more optimistic. Again, there's still a great deal of pessimism. 30% more people think their economic situation will get worse in the next 12 months than better, but this is up from 60% back a couple of years ago. And so how do you think the government is handling the economy? We've seen that people generally feel more positive about the economy. They generally feel that it's getting better and that their situation will improve. But do they credit the government? Now here we've seen a much slower shift. Only in the last couple of months have people been prepared to give the government the credit for economic recovery. Up until that point, they didn't feel that it was really anything to do with the government. It was just, state of things. So despite this slightly better or slightly more optimistic outlook from British adults, there is still a great deal of worry that people hold in this country, and that is probably stopping them from spending, stopping them from going out there and purchasing, starting businesses. There's a great deal of worry. 68% of people feel that they will suffer from spending cuts. 2/3 do not think they'll have enough money to live comfortably on. And 61% of people feel like them or people like them will lose their job or have difficulty finding work. And also we have majorities worried that they'll suffer ill health and lose out because of foreign factories and workers. And even where there aren't majorities, there are still sizable minorities who are worried that they may lose their home, become victims of crime, or suffer discrimination and unfair treatment. And this kind of plays into the whole national psyche, these worries that people have, not just over the economy, but every other area of life. So we can't really talk about the economy without briefly mentioning the cuts, which will be a key battleground at the next election. As you can see, only recently have the cuts been believed to be a good thing for the economy, which obviously you'd expect as the economic conditions improve and people are generally more optimistic. They're more likely to say that cuts have been good for the economy, but it's been quite slow in coming. But the one thing that hasn't really moved, although it's increased slightly, is that the cuts are generally seen as unfair. And when we couple this with the next slide, we can see that majorities of people are worried that the cuts will affect people like them. And the issue you have here, and it's part of the reason why Ed Miliband is focusing on the cost of living crisis and whether or not the recovery is suitable for all, are these two slides. When more people believe that the cuts are unfair than fair, and over 50% of the population feel that they're affecting them, then that line of argument becomes much stronger. So I wanted to put a little bit about potential European referendum in 2017. As you can see, we've been polling on this for about 3 years, and then only 3 polls have people wanting to vote for Britain to leave the EU not been ahead. And actually in only 1 poll over the last 3 years that we've done, more people have said that they would vote to stay than leave the EU. So there is an uphill battle for those who are pro-European and pro the EU to fight. However, we ask a question which we consider our Wilson question, whereby we ask the British population to imagine that David Cameron goes to the EU, he says he has a better settlement, and then how will people vote? And this completely changes everything. Now, whereas before we had a majority of people voting to leave the EU, now by 2 to 1 people will vote to remain in the EU.
Wasn't that fascinating? That was fascinating. You know, Laurence, thank you very much for coming. YouGov is the foremost organisation in its field at what they do, and to have them here, let me tell you, is a bit of a coup. You know, not everybody gets YouGov to come here, especially as we hijacked Joe at the conference and said to him, can you come and do it? So thank you much for stepping into the place, and what a fascinating presentation that was. This is your opportunity to ask questions of our first 2 speakers. We thought we'd have a question and answer session at some point, so we thought we'd do it now, but I've got a question for you to start with. On slide number 6, what was the percentage? No, just kidding. We've got a roving mic. Who'd like to ask a question of David or indeed Laurence?
Trying to avoid a bit of silence, so I'll put my hand up. David, I was wondering if you could tell us whether there are any proposals to link the Brooklands industrial estate with the M25. Ooh. Because there was some talk about that some years ago, and traffic links to this wonderful industrial estate where a lot of business activity takes place for large and small businesses can't be helped by the amount of time it takes to get back to Cobham or over to Addlestone. Thank you.
Thought we'd start with the easy questions. Thank you, John, that's great. Thank you.
I don't honestly know the answer. Is that fair? But I will. Yeah. But I can see the sense in it. And actually, when they built the Cobham service stations, that's when they should have had a bit more imagination.
Would like to stand up?
Thank you. I'm interested in what Surrey is doing towards preventative healthcare rather than crisis healthcare.
Great question.
Especially for older people.
Well, it obviously doesn't apply to you. So, well, 3 years ago, I put 10 million aside for preventive care for adult social care, because unless you actually prevent things happening in the first place, you create a huge budget later down the line. And I'm pleased to say that that money is now starting to work really well with the districts and boroughs around the place. And we've actually set up telecare centres. That is where you can, elderly people can go in and try out all sorts of different stuff. We have centres for people who are disabled and who have disabilities around the place. We've got one in Redhill, Epsom and places like that. And we've also got telecare, where you ring up, or if you've got some stuff in your house and you can stay at home, we can tell whether you've put the kettle on or not.
Going back on what he was saying earlier on, in fact, Councillor Derek Denyer and I, when we were both on the planning committee for Elmbridge, were fighting to have that motorway link, which unfortunately everyone at the time said there won't be the vehicle movements. However, David, this morning, and I'm being a bit unkind here, but this morning you did comment about what the county is wanting to do on transport. Could you just give us a little bit of an insight into those ideas?
Yeah. The biggest problem for most businesses in Surrey is the A3. Yeah. And I'm due to see Patrick McLaughlin with the Chief Executive. I think it's next Wednesday. I can never remember where I am. But we're seeing him next week, and that's one of the big issues we're going to talk to him about. The government has to find some money from transport budgets to sort the A3 out. It's a nightmare for businesses, frankly. And I will pick up the issue about the M25 coming off of Brooklyn, so I'll have a look at it myself later. But also there is another issue, and that's with rail traffic. There is a railway line that runs from Tunbridge in the east that goes all the way across to Redhill, Dorking, Reigate. I'm not sure the right way, you know. Don't trust me, I'm not the driver. And then eventually to Guildford, and then out towards Woking and down onto Reading. If you're doing business across that area, you don't want to be getting in your car, getting stuck and held up with traffic. Just as easy to get on a train. There are two parts of that line that need electrification. Small things. And that's the second thing we're going to be asking the Secretary of State for money to electrify that line, so that trains can go from Tunbridge in the east to Reading in the west much quicker and more often and better. And the other thing I would like us to do is to build another station out at the Surrey Research Park. Is anybody from Surrey Research Park here? I'll be quiet, you Becky. I think if we could build a railway platform at the Surrey Research Park, that would help businesses, but also help the university, also help people going to the hospital there as well. Sorry, does that make sense?
I'm delighted to be here to speak to you today at a place that was once the birthplace of the British aeronautical engineering business, Sopwith Aircraft, and later on Vickers Engineering. It's an interesting thought, and something I learnt only the other day, that at the end of the Second World War, more people in Britain worked in the aircraft industry than was in the British Army at that time in the war. And indeed, the aircraft industry drove our recovery from recession and the debt that we were suffering at the time. It is a very different political position. It's never been here before. And if David is the most senior politician in the county, then the Police and Crime Commissioner would certainly be the second most senior one. What's the role about? Well, first off, on behalf of yourselves, it is to ascertain what your priorities are, what you think is most important for the police. Secondly, make sure the police do it. Thirdly, set the council tax precept. And just like the county council we heard from David, we get the worst settlement in the country from government for policing, and yet pay more for policing than anyone else. And then the next part is to make sure the borough and district councils of the county and county council all work together cohesively to improve on public safety, the sense of safety in the county. Government, since this role has developed, has also gone on to say that their vision is that the Police and Crime Commissioners will also be the lead on things like delivering rehabilitation with the probation service, on delivering services for victims, making sure victims get looked after better, the victim support service, and so on making sure the Crown Prosecution Service and the court service look after victims, and also engaging with the judiciary and the magistracy. So if you start to look at what this job's about, There's the police, and then there's an end crime bit. So we're talking 11 borough and district councils in this county, a county council, the Crown Prosecution Service, the court service, the probation service, the prison service, the victim support scheme, voluntary agencies, neighbourhood watches, and so on, and commercial businesses. The job is much, much more than just saying, Chief Constable, I want you to do this. It isn't that. So, what I'm going to cover then for the next few minutes is talk to you about the people's priorities for this county, what you, the people of the county, have told me is important for you, and then I'm going to tell you about how we're going to move that forward in the county to meet some of your goals. So, if I can just quickly, if I can work out how to do this thing. Good. Right, some of you can see that, some of you can't. When I decided to run for election and thereafter, I had to work out what was important to the public. And the first thing you told me was you wanted a zero-tolerance policing approach taken to antisocial behaviour, violent bullies, burglars, people who deal drugs to our children and young people. In short, the people that blight our lives. What does zero-tolerance policing mean? It doesn't mean lock them up, it doesn't mean hang them, doesn't mean flog them, but what it does mean is we don't ignore stuff. We don't ignore the most minor of incivilities. It's about changing mindsets. When people throw rubbish on the ground or misbehave, it's about doing something. It's about taking back public space, shopping centres, shopping malls. And it's also about working in partnership, in collaboration with anyone who can make a difference to make the county safer. The next thing the public told me that they wanted was they wanted the assets taken off criminals, benefit fraudsters, drug dealers and burglars, and that money ploughed back into enforcement to put more visible policing out there on the street. The third thing was they wanted victims being treated better by the criminal justice system, because all too often the people who work in the criminal justice system think it's about them rather than it's about the victims. And those of you who think about it will remember we've had the Jimmy Savile cases here, we've had the dreadful Frances Andradny case, the lady who took her own life, et al. There have been several cases in this county where we could have done better for victims, whether it was the police, Crown Prosecution Service or social services. People also want a better view, a better way of saying what's important to them about policing and their sense of safety. We've organised a whole different way of gathering information from the public, so we hear what's important to them, and it involves everything from having Twitter accounts to me actually being out and meeting the Federation of Small Businesses in Surrey, which is something that the person who oversaw the police authority before would never have done before. And I hasten to say the police authority's job is just a little bit of what I do. And the county council have all got various council officers doing one form of enforcement or another, whether it's enforcing planning, weights and measures, parking, food standards, food safety, etc. They're all in small little silos, small little groups. What I'm hoping to achieve is that we break down all of those silos and increase the number of those officers working for councils out on the street, looking visible, giving visible reassurance and deterrent, but at the same time being supported by police. What does that actually mean? Well, it means this, that if someone walks along in the street and they throw a bit of rubbish on the floor, a council officer looking like that, have you noticed those aren't police officers, by the way? They aren't police officers, they're council officers in another council area. A council officer looking like that will say, you have thrown some rubbish on the floor, and they're mindful of the fact we all know it's wrong. They're mindful of the fact we've attempted to educate it out because there's rubbish bins there, so they give them a ticket. And if the person refuses to give their name and address, they will be being videoed by a body-worn camera, and still, if they still refuse to give their name and address, police will attend and enforce getting that name and address, and if not, they'll arrest that person. Because do you know what? Only bad people throw rubbish on the floor on our streets. I don't, no one in this room does. Bad people throw rubbish on the floor and they do other bad stuff. They drive their cars without tax, they break into houses, etc. So we are educating, we are engineering, but we have to accept enforcement.
That's great. Now, if those of you that have very good observancy skills would have noticed that our leader David Hodge isn't here. The reason he's not here is because he's outside. Oh, you're here, David, you're back. David was outside on the estate looking at how traffic gets in and out of this complex and seeing how we can make it more efficient. Am I right, David? Yep. So there you go, real action by Surrey County Council leader there and then. Thank you, David, that's fantastic. I'm delighted now to be able to introduce our penultimate speaker. Mike Cherry is the National Chairman for Policy for the FSB.
I came down yesterday evening to support the Epsom branch of the FSB on Keep Trade Local, and to also give the council a certificate awarding them our thanks for actually having free parking on the 4 Sundays in the run-up to Christmas. So well done to them. But as you can see, Keep Trade Local is our flagship campaign, which is not just for Christmas, it is for the whole year, and it is for you to recognise all of your small businesses, not just retail on the high street, but across all the industrial premises as well. Support them, spend a tenner with them, do whatever you need, but go and do something every single week of the year if you can. The key lobbying issues that we're working on at the moment, and we've already heard business rates, is right up there at the top of the agenda. Quite obviously, it has been an ardent issue of mine personally for many, many years. And it's something that I'm delighted to say that across the political spectrum now, it is also at last at the very top of the agenda. As many of you will know, it is a subjective tax that we all have to pay before we open our doors. It is not based on accuracy in any relative way as far as the FSB is concerned, and it impacts on small businesses disproportionately because it's not a fair tax either. And the FSB is doing quite a substantive piece of work around that to try and put forward alternative solutions to government, and you'll see that all the other main business organisations and other larger organisations are also calling for similar things. So hopefully this time around, and it won't happen in the next 18 months, but maybe next Parliament, over the next 5-year period from 2015 to 2020, we will see some serious action on that at last. Energy is another big one for the FSB. Clearly, small businesses are again disproportionately affected by the large business energy providers in particular. We have at last managed to succeed in getting rollover relief stopped, so you don't automatically have your rollovers now, or you won't have going through next year. And the other big one that we're asking for there is for actual tariffs to be published, so you and I as a business can know who we're going to, what we're going to be asked to pay, and we can compare what we're being asked to pay, because at the moment it's a lottery. And quite frankly, many small businesses are no different to consumers in their own right. And that's another area that we are doing a very significant piece of work on, businesses as consumers, because the regulators, whether it's the Ofcoms or the others, just do not seem to recognise that small businesses in the main do not have the same protection that they need as consumers get, and that's another piece of work that we are working on at the moment. But crime against business, as many of you will know, is a significant problem for many, many businesses. It accounts for well over a quarter of all reported crime statistics, and many crimes obviously do not get reported yet. So again, one of our big pleas to anybody, if you do have a crime, then please make the police aware of it. Things are improving. We've got the PCCs in post, and one of the other biggest issues at the moment that the government is really, really focused on, of course, is cybercrime, and that is an issue that is being widely recognised. The Met are putting extra officers, I think about another 400 officers, into a special cybercrime unit to try and make sure that that is dealt with, and that is certainly at the top of the government's agenda. For my sins, I still also sit, because I'm a founder member and director of the National Business Crime Forum, and that pulls together all of the main business organisations and is a link between all the public sector organisations and private sector organisations to highlight all the issues. It sits and has a coordinating body through ACPO with the chief constables, with the public sector, and with the government and the Home Office. So there's a lot of work that the FSB has been doing over many years on that, and I think it's really refreshing to hear what Kevin had to say in his new approach to trying to make sure that the smaller crimes don't lead to bigger crimes, so that your businesses aren't affected going forwards. Access to finance remains a very, very big issue indeed. Our surveys continually show that 4 out of 10 members cannot get the money that they need. And even though in our Q3 survey, which was published in September, Q4 is next month, our Q3 survey very clearly showed that we can say that there is now cautious optimism back in the economy. And I think that's really, really welcoming. But it's only down to the hard work that all of you do in your businesses to actually make that happen. One thing that always impresses me when I see a group of members and other small businesses like this is just how you just get on and do the job no matter what's thrown at you. So thank you for all of that and your work in the communities, because you are part of the community. And I wish, you know, whether it's the banks or it's the other alternate providers, that they would actually recognise that the money that you need means that you can then start to grow your businesses more, take on more jobs and give more back to the community. How many of you are suffering more than 60 days for late payments? Just put your hands up. Wow. That just reflects how serious this problem is. And of course we have the prompt payment code. Absolutely great, except that those, or many of those who are signed up to it, aren't complying with it. You know, you've got some really big names there who are abusing it. You had the initiative that the Prime Minister announced last autumn about the supply chain initiative, so that hopefully you can get more finance through that. But that's being abused. We're seeing large public sector providers or contractors actually abusing that by going out from 120 to 180 days in some cases, and that just is not acceptable. And that's something else that we're taking up with the government on the enforcement issue. It is not right that people are taking longer than 30 days to pay. And one of the suggestions we've been putting forward is for the FTSE 350 to actually be made and encouraged to do that. Otherwise, this may just be one of those few times that the Federation calls for legislation on late payment to be brought in some way that it doesn't disproportionately affect you the hardest in the first instance, so you get the money you get and it flows from the top down through the chain. And of course, on public procurement, that is one of the big things that our local authority survey highlights. For those of you who've seen it, and again thanks to all the local authorities down here who filled the forms in and contributed to that this year. One of the things there is to make sure that local authorities, if they have got prompt payment to their tier 1 suppliers, actually make sure that that prompt payment goes right back through the supply chain. And I would encourage police authorities, or police forces as they now are, to actually do that in their procurement as well. So a message there for you, Kevin, if you can take that back, please, that would really, really help. Where you've got a tier 1 supplier being paid 10, 20, 30 days, make sure that they pass that through their supply chain. Keep Trade Local I've mentioned, and I'm sure you're all aware that we have got Small Business Saturday coming up on the 7th of December. A couple of other quick points, if I may. Alongside access to finance, the government announced last autumn the formation of a business bank, and whilst that won't affect many of you directly because it's a wholesale bank, that we do feel can be used as the start of something that we've highlighted in our Enterprise 2050 paper, and it's called Enterprise 2050 on purpose, because it's actually telling government, take a step back. Stop all these short-term initiatives that may be pot sensitive, so by the time we find out about it, there's no money left for us. And just step back and look at all the support that small businesses need into the medium term. Now, that is around access to finance, it could be around export support, it could be around anything else. But when we looked into this, and the paper highlights this beautifully, anybody like to have a guess at how many government grants and initiatives and things in helping small businesses are actually out there? Anyone have a guess? Is it 100? Couple of hundred? Very, very close. 891.
What Mike and his team does is really hard slog stuff. It takes years to get the message through, but it does eventually work. So, Mike, thank you, and thank you to Graham Fisher. Yeah, I don't know about all of you, but the past 12 months I've never heard the FSB be in the media as often as we have been, and it's really fantastic. And Graham's on the media quite often, national media, so does a good job there. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. So, just to finish the afternoon off for our speakers, who remembers Tiswas? Okay, I'm going to talk to the men now. Who remembers Tiswas? And don't tell me you were watching because of Chris Tarrant. Okay, I was there too. So, I didn't watch Chris Tarrant. Well, I watched it because of Sally James. You know what? It's fantastic to have her here today because she's a local businesswoman, and it'd be great to hear it from a local businesswoman what's happening on the ground here in Surrey today.
5 years ago, we did a Tiswas Reunited, which was actually the celebration of the end of it. So it started about 35 years ago, so it makes me feel 108.
Still watching it on YouTube, Sally.
People are watching it. And I'm actually quite proud to say that a couple of weeks ago, Channel 5 did a programme of the 50 greatest children's shows ever. And I knew we were in it because I'd been interviewed for it. And I was sitting at home on a Friday night watching it with my husband saying, I hope we get to the top 10. And then we got to 9, 8, 7, and we still weren't on. And I thought, I wonder how we're doing. And actually, we're very proud to say that we came second, and second only to Blue Peter, which of course was always going to win. It had been running for 54 years. So we were absolutely thrilled to be voted second of all time. So that was really very exciting. And I do get asked about it a lot. And I was even reminded by Ray here. Where are you, Ray? That he was actually on the QE2 with me 32 years ago, we recognised, just after he was there as a passenger and I was there throwing pies around and doing very silly things. So that's my kind of past. So you might think, well, how does someone who earns their living flinging flans and chucking buckets end up talking at the FSB conference? Well, the reason is really that 21 years ago, I started my own business, so I am a local businesswoman, and it's just great to see so many small businesses here today, and it's been really fantastic to hear all the speakers and about how positive everyone is about Surrey, and it is a great place. It's a great place to do business, it's a great place for networking, and I remember I used to do a programme on Brooklands Radio all about business, and Pauline Hedges, who's done a brilliant job putting all this together today, was a regular guest, and when I first started the programme, we used to talk about recession because people used to phone in, oh my goodness, you know, and everyone was sort of so depressed. Where are we all going to go? Are we all going to survive? And she was always, you know, a very sane woman saying, Surrey's always the last in and the first out of any recession. And I think we can probably all say that has happened. We are all still here. We're all still in business. So well done, everybody, for that. And well done to the FSB for fighting for us so hard. I mean, my business is in Cobham. I've been in business 21 years, as I said. My business is school uniform supply. I look after about 17 schools in the county and beyond. I've got on-site shops in Tooting and Guildford and over at Mickleham. And I was very pleased, David, to hear that there's going to be a lot more schools opening and a lot more children needing school uniform. So that could be...
I'd have known that, I'd just close them.
So, as anyone will know, though, I mean, I'm in Cobham, and you just touched on business rates, and they're horrendous. I mean, when I open the envelope to find out what I've got to pay next year, I have to sit down and have a large gin and tonic. It is so much money. So it's great to know that there is a fight out there for our small businesses. And in Cobham, our rents are sky high as well, not helped, of course, by the fact it used to be, when you used to go around Cobham, you'd have the butcher, the baker, you know, local little shops. Now we've got, you know, Costa and Starbucks, and all the big guys are in there, and they just drive the rents up, the rates up. I'm clinging on in there because it's a brilliant place to do business. We very rarely have an empty shop in there, but I don't think people realise that the costs before you even sell a pair of socks are sky high, and this is what all of us sort of small businesses face. When I started my business, I started it really because we felt that the provision of school uniform was not done extremely well. It was kind of done in the back of men's outfitters, that sort of thing, and we felt it needed to be more of a service. And I think those of you that are here today whose businesses are thriving will know that there is still a place for good service. You know, I don't think everybody wants to just go online and get the cheapest thing they can. And our business is built on service. I really look after my schools. I try to keep all their uniform completely up to date. I redesign it when it's necessary, and really try and give the parents a good experience when they come into the shop. How school uniform supply works is that usually a school will appoint one supplier, in some cases two, but it's usually just one. And the reason for that is because you have to hold so much stock. A private school, for instance, that will have a completely bespoke uniform, that has to be ordered a long time in advance. It has to sit on your shelf because you can't, everyone leaves everything to the last minute. You can't have a child coming in, you know, on the 5th of August, starting school next month, and not be able to provide them with the whole kit. So a lot of money is tied up in the items that they will need. So although you might have the monopoly, if you like, you have got to hold an awful lot of stock. And every year, of course, in August, we all get the bashings from, you know, all driven through by the supermarkets, you know, go to Tesco's, you can get your whole uniform for £10. Most schools don't actually want all the children in the country to be in exactly the same colour and uniform, and they don't recognise the importance of an independent schoolwear supplier being available. I mean, this year, for instance, you know, Marks and Spencer's completely ran out of grey shorts because they don't care. They've just ordered what they want to sell. Once they've sold it, they've made their profit, they're going to move on now to selling Christmas goods. But we have always got those goods, so we are always there to provide a service. So every year I belong to a consortium of women in uniform, and we're all women who've got uniform shops around the country. And you know, we just know that every August we come in for this ear bashing, and then people think that we're expensive, but we're not expensive because we've got the stock all the time, and obviously we do have to make a little bit of profit, mainly to pay the rent and the rates. So that's my little political thing. So it's been lovely to be here this afternoon, and I think, you know, fantastic that so many of you are here. And also, the importance of networking I've found in this county, which has been incredible. I see Jane at the back there with her networking organisation. Pauline and I originally met through networking. And in fact, I even got a massive piece of business through Pauline, really, because she was talking to somebody in Guildford who was having a bad experience with their school uniform supplier. She said, "You have to see Sally." I went down to see them, and I've been looking after that school for 3 years. So it just shows it's meeting each other, and I'm proud to be a local businesswoman in this county. And as you started off the proceedings with a little bit of audience participation, I would like to continue that theme just a little bit, because I'm actually going to be in pantomime this year over in Harpenden. Oh yes, I am. And I'm going to be the good fairy waving my wand, and I'm going to make sure that good triumphs over evil. And will you all help me? Yes! Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. At the 11th hour, whilst it was all going swimmingly well and everything was going to plan, 230 people registered to be here, I get an email from the caterer. Sorry, I can't do the catering. Then get an email from the MP. Sorry, I can't be there. And at 8 o'clock this morning, Pauline walks in, and the whole venue is completely upside down. Totally the wrong way around. It wasn't meant to be like this. You should have all been sitting over there facing the big picture. All the stands should have been down the sides, and the food should have been there. So after a bit of industrial language, all right, a lot of industrial language, if I may be so bold, quick thinking, fast acting, we made things happen. And isn't that the great thing about small business? And I say small business. Things happen and we react quickly. Let me tell you now, I've met some CEOs of big companies. Most of them could never, ever, ever run a small business. We've had a fantastic event this afternoon. You can see them all packing up now. We've had 150 plus people here, some fantastic speakers, and it's been a really great event. An event like this, what they have gotten is the opportunity to have maybe met that new customer or new supplier. Now, you may not recognise it from today, but maybe in 6 months' time they'll look back and think, where did I meet that person? And of course, the great thing about these sort of events and networking is that sometimes it isn't the first person you meet, but the second or third person as a consequence. So these events are not just about informative, they're not just about gathering for the sake of gathering. It's a business event to help businesses connect, learn something new, and you know what? Maybe even have some fun. And if you were here, can I have my boomerang back?